Okay, so welcome to the A Younger Theatre in Isolation series. I'm Nina and I'm one of our theatre reviewers and I'm conducting interviews in isolation and I'm joined by Suba Does. It's lovely to meet you.
Hello, hi. Lovely to meet you as well.
How are you doing in isolation?
I'm doing weirdly all right, which nobody wants to hear. We've been really busy at high tide, which keeps the mind off perhaps the more stressful things about what's going
Yeah,
on. It's good to feel useful in a way in these
yeah.
times. I've discovered a love of vacuuming. Who knew? I bought a new Hoover, and it transpires when you have a decent Hoover, vacuuming actually feels a bit like playing a computer game. So there's been that.
Having a decent Hoover is generally a brilliant thing in these times.
It totally is. It's very therapeutic, and listening to a lot of Dua Lipa's new album and becoming convinced that she is the savior of the younger generation, as
Amazing.
she has handled lockdown like a boss, as they say.
She is the sort of soundtrack to TikTok. So many of her songs are like the songs of TikTok.
And they
It's
also mashed up
amazing.
one of the album tracks with the BBC News theme. And there's been this whole thing of people doing remixes of the BBC News theme because it is an excellent piece of music.
It is.
And yeah, then they played the kind of mashup like on the news, which is extraordinary. But hey, we're in strange and inventive times.
Yeah, crazy times. Okay, I'm going to introduce a bit of your work to our listeners. If I forget anything, then please tell them more about you. So, Shuba is the artistic director of HighTide Theatre Company. HighTide is a theatre company based in East Anglia, which has launched the careers of many playwrights, including Jack Thorne and Ella Hickson, who are past alumni. Shuba was a previously associate director at The Curve in Leicester and has directed for venues including Nottingham Playhouse, the Young Vic, and the Roundhouse. And Shuba was also previously resident director at the National Theatre Studio. And I believe that you were the youngest person ever to hold that position.
I think so, but possibly only by like a number of weeks. That might be a very technical record, but
Still very
I felt
impressive.
like a baby. So I mean, I still feel like a baby a lot of the time, but I'm not sure anyone ever actually feels like a grown up. I think
No,
it's a lie.
I think everyone thinks that when they grow up, at some point, you're a grown up, and then you say, "Oh, well, yes, I know exactly what I'm doing." But does
Yeah.
anyone know what they're doing?
Well, I think in terms of lockdown, the fact that I seem to spend most of my evenings eating whole packets of chocolate digestives indicates that maybe being a grown up hasn't quite hit yet.
I think that's the perfect way to spend lockdown, personally. So I'm very excited about this interview because I feel like, so a Young Theatre, obviously, our aim is to bring younger people into the arts and give them a platform for their talent. And High Tide is a company that really is providing support for people at the start of their careers, for example, with the script reading service.
Mm, yeah.
So I know that you've got a new script submission window coming up. Could you tell us a little bit about this?
Yeah, I mean, so we exist to nurture talent, and consequently, certainly in this moment when the lockdown took place, we were in the relatively fortunate position of being a theatre company who hadn't been planning to go into production again until next spring,
Okay.
due to kind of co-producing and touring arrangements. So we had this kind of chunk of breathing space, and this is my first year as artistic director here at High Tide, and so we'd set a lot of time around planning and things that we were going to relaunch and new activities we wanted to establish.
Yeah.
We had that kind of that moment of pause built in anyway, and so consequently in that moment when kind of crisis hit us and we kind of asked ourselves the question, well, what are we here for? What are we here to do? The most important thing within that was wanting to do whatever we could to support writers in this period. So we put out a raft of opportunities, which we call Lighthouse, because in a way this is about the light at the end of the tunnel, and the fact that we will resume as a creative sector. And one of the absolute priorities for us is that as many artists as possible feel included and supported in a conversation, supported in their creativity. So we have established a refreshed version of our script reading process. So we've had 3 windows, or announced 3 windows across the current kind of lockdown period that may extend. It's the really traditional thing of a writer sending in their script for feedback. What we wanted to do alongside that was announce our new associate artists, who are Chris Sonnex, previous artistic director at The Bunker, and of course, one of the most incredible champions of new, young and diverse voices this country has seen in the last few years, let alone anything else. Chino Adimba, the most extraordinary, brilliant playwright in her own right, but also a director, dramaturg, facilitator. Aisha Zia, who's from Peterborough, and at HighTide, we're based in the east of England. That's where we produce our annual festival. So supporting that voices from the region felt really exciting. Aisha, who's previously a resident writer with Commonwealth, the most incredible, inventive, experimental playwright in her own right, creating installation work and testimonial work and all these sorts of things. And the Queer House, who we collaborated with last year on the productions of Pink Lemonade and Since You've Been Gone, which we supported taking up to Edinburgh. And again, as a collective and an initiative, the work that the Queer House are doing to represent and nurture the experiences of trans, non-binary artists, just a brilliant set of values encompassed by those artists. And they also, for us, are now our script readers. What we felt was really important was that, you know, in traditional script submission processes, a writer just sends their play off into a void and doesn't necessarily know who's picking it up or reading it. And I felt that there was an opportunity to have just greater transparency around that, to kind of give power back in a way. So we've invited readers to submit their plays in, to pick who they want to read it, because there is something about a writer creating from a lived experience, a personal experience. We all create from our context. And unsurprisingly, if somebody's writing from, if I was writing from my experience of being a, previously working class brown boy from the northeast of England, if I was sending my play and it was read by, an Etonian in their 50s, they might take a different perspective on the story that I'm trying to create and how I'm creating it. Of course, there are, fundamentals that everyone knows about playmaking and structure and interrogating a story and executing it to those objective standards. But nuance and experimentation, I think there is something about ensuring that we diversify at all stages of our reading and our assessment of work, not least if we want to be in the 21st century. So our script submission process has been for writers to send in and to nominate a reader. So our first window was last month, and we had 100 scripts in. So the windows are kind of open for, the first one was open for 5 days. We're stating within that we're absolutely prioritising reading scripts by writers from the east of England. And also writers from socioeconomically challenged backgrounds, because potentially one has more opportunities at one's disposal to get one's work read and fed back on if you have more economic resources behind you. So this is an entirely free service. All of the programmes we've created in Lighthouse are free. And we were kind of blown away with that initial response. Some brilliant work has reached our attention. That's now sat on my massive reading pile, which you'd have thought I'd be getting through in these times, but it appears to be really busy still. And the next window will be at the end of May. And it's a feedback process. We're not undertaking necessarily to go into production with any of this work, but it is about hopefully offering writers a focus for work they're making. And knowing that there is some support there and some generosity, which feels like the most important thing any of us can be doing at these times.
I think that's really interesting, the idea of choosing the reader of your work, because I think one thing that can be really scary when I've looked, for example, at script submission processes and been like, I actually have no idea who's going to read this. Maybe I'm sending the script in, it's the kind of, and someone just hates the exact theme that I've written about, and maybe it's quite comforting to know who it's going to. You have that sort of connection.
Yeah, and it you know, it's not rocket science either to say that or do that. And I think, you know, our sector is full of invisible barriers. Transparency has always been one of the greatest challenges for the arts. We're a sector that's defined by the unpaid internship and assisting for free and all these sorts of things. And all of, you know, we can talk a good game about access and accessibility, but unless we really hold a microscope up, a lens up to every element of the creative process, we're not really going to dismantle any of the structural barriers we know exist. And we know they exist in theatre because they exist in society, for God's sake. We can't sit here at this moment knowing that in this country the majority of people dying of COVID-19 are from low income and often non-white backgrounds. It's like 72% of deaths are from BAME backgrounds. There are structural problems in our society, so of course they're replicated in theatre, and we at HighTide are really committed to doing what we can to dismantle those things in small ways that, you know, it was not effortful for us to do the thing that we've done around script submissions, and I hope that more people will think of that as being useful going forwards.
Yeah, I think that sounds really important and interesting as a way of getting new writers and new voices sort of into the industry. I know that you're also you've created a crisis support program for people who are already sort of creatives and might really be struggling in these times.
Yeah, and it was again that was initially, I mean, you know, at the start of the lockdown period, we thought, okay, everyone's going to be maybe stuck at home for a month, and in a time that creates anxiety, and you know, writing is isolating enough at the best of times. It is a lonely and hard profession, and we were about to announce all of these cool, sexy things we were going to do in the year ahead, which hopefully we'll do next year instead. So I won't do any spoilers now. But a real theme around all of that was that for us as a company nurturing writers, one of the things we can help address is that sense of community. And wanting to overcome isolation, ironically enough. So we again just set what we thought was going to be a little thing out there, which was about writers who we could pair up with HighTide alumni, because there's also something really important about writers interacting with other writers. Oftentimes in development processes within big organisations, and I've worked for many, it's writers being paired up with directors like me or producers or dramaturgs, and that's great and meaningful, and it pushes the work on. But on a human level, that writer to writer interaction, and as you mentioned, we have some great alumni, and so, you know, we've had like Nick Payne and Luke Barnes and Morgan Lloyd Malcolm sign up to be mentors in this new initiative. Again, we were overwhelmed. We had 100 applications, and it felt churlish. It felt mean to be in a conversation about selection at a time like this. So faced with that, you know, we don't have the capacity to support 100 writers. We're a staff of 4 at HighTide. We're taking 12 on for this journey, but we've turned the rest of the applicants into a writers network, and we're going to be doing a series of initially Zoom conversations with industry figures, other writers, just moments to come together again. We're going to encourage everyone to bring a drink with them, in the hope that we can do those things in the pub down the line. But yeah, so 12 writers that we're taking forwards. We're announcing them next week, so I won't do any spoilers on that either. But one of the mechanisms we used to select in the end was actually kind of acknowledging that this crisis period is now going to go on for longer. I mean, we're seeing now, of course, theatres cancelling their work through the summer. Some real questions about whether theatres will reopen in the winter. Cameron McIntosh saying he doesn't think they'll reopen until next year. And, you know, artists can't just pause in that.
No.
Other thing, of course, is that when we reopen, whether that's because of social distancing or, you know, things may feel different. also really, really importantly for us at HighTide, this experience of isolation and exclusion. It's an experience for us, those of us who are fortunate enough to be able-bodied, to have a decent income, to be in a city. But that experience of isolation is a lived experience daily, year-round, for so many people in so many of the audiences that we're interested in the east of England especially. So there's something about kind of going, well, how do we hang on to some of these mechanisms, some of these ideas, because they'll help us reach audiences forever. So the 12 writers where we are bringing on board are writers who we just had some really exciting conversations with about, well, what could theatre look like that's different? What should it be? And not expecting anyone to have any answers, because none of us do. I mean, we've all just been chucking out, you know, YouTube streams of stuff we already had recorded. And I don't think that's the future. I don't think that's the answer.
No.
That's not the most exciting creative engagement with the scenario we find ourselves faced with. So it was about, bringing together that group to help us start to interrogate that question and maybe invent some bonkers stuff that people can start to see later in the year.
Yeah, I think because we need to, obviously at the moment it's quite a dark time, but people need something as well to be looking forward to and kind of seeing a light at the end of the tunnel. I think that one of the things that scares me the most with this sort of when a theatres, cinemas, things like that going to reopen is we need the arts to have something to look forward to and kind of escape from this dark time that we're in. And so encouraging these already established people, but also especially new voices, is almost more important than ever.
Yeah, and I think also, you know, as I was saying just earlier, I mean, the arts is one of the most financially precarious careers to pursue. And that, you know, we have people from low-income backgrounds and vulnerable backgrounds pursuing careers in the arts because of their passion. Because they're willing to put themselves through the hell that can sometimes entail, because the personal, emotional rewards are great. In a time like this, when people are really having to weigh up that question of, is it worth it? You know, for those artists for whom it's always a challenge to create because they don't necessarily have those resources behind them, this could really kill off a generation. I mean, not literally, I hope, God, that's such a terrible choice of phrase, but this could really
remove the opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, it would just mean we lose those voices, lose those people who kind of go, do you know what, this is just too bloody hard. And unless we're really actively trying to do whatever we can to go on the front foot of saying, yeah, we know it's hard, and this sector, most sectors, can often be very unfair, but there are companies and human beings out there who really care that you exist. And of course, you know, the easiest way we can show that care is to pay people, and pay people properly. And, you know, that's something we insist on at HighTide, of course. But above and beyond and around that, there's a pastoral effort. There is, as I said, and this is why, for us, these themes around the idea of community, the idea of bringing people together, sit really, really closely at the heart of everything we do. So, you know, you mentioned, say, light at the end of the tunnel, and that's why we called our programme Lighthouse. And it has been humbling and moving, and, you know, we're all that kind of high emotion, but I mean, I've literally burst into tears looking at my Twitter in a good way. Because people seem to be really engaging with what we're doing and thinking that it's because we care, which we do.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that I find, and I'm sure a lot of other young creatives find really inspiring about your programme, and especially the fact that you pay young artists that you're working with, because that is such a big barrier to people entering this industry, is they cannot afford to just work for free to go up the ladder, and that is such a big barrier. And I think that HighTide paying people that they work with is such a simple thing, but it's actually such a big solution, just doing that one small thing. And I know that affects budgets and finances, and God, why would you if somebody's willing to do it for free? But it's, you know, it's
this is a total anecdote city, I apologise, but one of my
All right.
friends who's a brilliant lawyer, has done a lot of work with big international governmental organisations, and was lobbying for set up a kind of campaign group, and they had some real success, and achieved this, which is actually encouraging the UN to not have unpaid internships. Because unsurprisingly, that was affecting the diversity of people accessing that level and those opportunities. And you kind of go, so that means you have a lot of very privileged people involved in policy decisions about the lived experience of some very vulnerable communities. And yeah, it's going to mean that people end up paying more, but you're never going to. But also, you know, the thing is, and I come back to this a hell of a lot, which is that diversity is not, it's not doing anyone a favor. Diversity is also just really good business sense. And you know, it was really interesting to hear Matt Hancock talking the other day when they announced that the government had met their target of 100,000 coronavirus tests a day. And he actually saluted the diversity of thought and the diversity of team that had been involved in helping them reach that target. And we can certainly ask questions about whether they did in fact reach that target, but that's for another time. But equally, when you have lots of different perspectives in a room, you come up with new solutions, you come up with new ideas. And as a theatre maker, and when I think about playwrights and when I think about our great and extraordinary voices, they have very rarely come from circumstances of privilege. Shakespeare, I always come back to this, he was written off as literally the upstart crow. Because he was not one of the posh boys. And I think importantly for me, we look to theatre, we look to art, we look to new writing to help us understand the world we live in. And just as a kind of question of physics, you can look at something most clearly, you can have the clearest perspective on it if you're at the margin of it. You know, and that idea of the marginalised voice, well, I think that voice sees the picture the most clearly.
I think that's I'm reflecting what you've said. That's actually so true. I think that sometimes distance is really helpful in being able to tell stories and having that distance from it, and we need to give people that platform. So on that sort of note, what advice would you give young people, particularly perhaps marginalised young people or people who are not from a position of privilege? What advice would you give to them about getting into directing or getting into the industry in general?
I think the most important thing anyone can do is try to, and especially if you're from a marginalised background, seek out mentors. And seek out supporters, because everyone's journey is inherently individual. The barriers any one person will face will be entirely dictated by their personal circumstances. So unfortunately, there's no one size fits all a kind of a top tip in a way. I think that's fair to offer. But what I will say is that for those of us, and certainly the the responsibility that I try to wear on a daily basis, having made some of that journey myself, is how do you send the ladder back down? And guarantee that every leader who in some way has something in common with you, if you feel like you come from a non-traditional background, they will want to have that coffee with you, they will want to answer that email, they will probably talk a lot about Dua Lipa. Which hopefully means that you will also know that they're not intimidating.
I think that young people often can be afraid to reach out to people because they're scared maybe that they're going to send an email and they're just going to get the door slammed in their face. I think it can be quite an intimidating thing, reaching out for help, I think.
Yeah, and I think that's because one's greatest barriers exist in oneself. And it's overcoming that, and there's only ever so much that an outside force can do to help you with that. But there is something like taking that deep breath and diving in and knowing that there are people there with armbands and life rafts and lighthouses.
Yeah, lighthouses. We need these lighthouses. What inspired you to get involved in theatre? What are some of your sort of formative memories of theatre or of creativity that made you think, oh, this world is for me?
Gosh,
Questions.
I may have to ask myself that question. No, I mean, I had the great good fortune to go to schools where young people were encouraged to make work. And that is, you know, I got a scholarship to the good local school when I was 11, and there was a head of drama there who literally fought for cash. Not literally, actually. That is an image. But who, fought for resources for
Yeah.
students to make their own shows. But actually, even prior to that, in state school in the northeast, in Seaton Delaval, where I grew up, and where, you know, everyone always is like, "That's not your accent." You know, teachers who encourage you. You know, God, I was in a um, student production of Grease when I was 9, that a bunch of
Nice.
kids slightly older, who must have been, what, 12, had decided to make for assembly and things like that. And that was teachers who were staying behind or coming in early and creating those spaces. And we know, of course, that the pressure that exists on the state education system now, those opportunities are being systematically eradicated.
Yeah, massively. I'm actually a teacher, and that's true. That's completely true.
Yeah,
We
because you
don't do
probably
school plays. So,
because you're too busy creating bizarre and pointless pieces of paperwork for Ofsted. Sorry, I'll
no
say that, you're
comment,
probably
no
not allowed
comment.
to. And that's a travesty. And, you know, the thing I always try to call attention to is, you know, within the context of the state curriculum, we see art subjects being relentlessly pulled out.
Yeah.
We see focus on STEM and not STEAM, because that's what's going to get you a job and all of these things.
Yeah.
But if that was truly the case, why is nobody asking the question that Eton still have a resident theatre director?
Yeah.
Harrow do also, I believe.
Yeah.
Lizzie Turner began her career as a drama teacher at Westminster School, doing extracurricular shows with the boys there that they were taking up to Edinburgh. Those seats of privilege are putting a hell of a lot of cash behind drama, because they understand its importance. They understand what it does for confidence, communication skills, leadership. So you ask yourself the question, well, if that exists there, but it's being taken out of the state curriculum, or taken, you know, where there aren't the resources to furnish that as an extracurricular activity, is that not a certain kind of act of class-based oppression? I just asked the
Yes, it
question.
definitely is.
So I can only go back to my great good luck to have grown up at a time where I was at a state school that had that capacity, and then I was at a on a scholarship at a fee-paying school where it was absolutely understood that that capacity should exist, and that's maybe not helpful for young people who find those opportunities aren't immediately available to them. But then I can only call attention to the work of brilliant youth theatres that are still fighting to exist. You know, we're collaborating with Company 3 as part of the Lighthouse programme, who created the coronavirus time capsule as a digital youth theatre. And so in Suffolk, we've also partnered with an organisation called 4YP, which is the Young People's Health Service for the region. And so they look after some of the most vulnerable young people, you know, with a really limited recourse to cultural opportunities, and we've been working with 4YP over the last couple of years, and we've now worked with them on rolling out the coronavirus time capsule with Company 3 there. So led by the phenomenal Ipswich-based theatre maker Kirsty Talent. They're collaborating weekly via WhatsApp and Zoom and all of this to create their digital response to the times we're living through. Again, a totally free initiative. Those resources are up online. Company 3 have made them available for any youth theatre in the world to access for free, because they are absolute heroes. So it is about finding those sorts of opportunities if they're not being provided to you through your school or educational context.
Yeah, I think the influence of what's going on in your community is so important, because with your school, it's just luck if you have something there that can provide you with that opportunity. But I know that I got involved in drama, particularly from local youth theatre, and it is such a big influence because you get a community through that as well, and that support network that encourages you to go up sort of further.
You just don't feel like a weirdo anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, that's definitely the kind of, that was
I think some people, you kind of want to find your drama people, your theatre people who you can talk about it.
But there's, you know, and at every level, and even now, it remains a case that finding your tribe is the most important thing you can do for your sanity and your survival. And you know, again, that's one of the interesting things about this experience, and the ways in which we're suddenly realizing that digital really, you know, God, like the gaming universe was there aeons ago, and all of this, but you know, that there are ways to interact and successfully exist as communities. You know, one of the other programs we've set up is our playwriting course, Write That Play, being led by casual BAFTA nominee Dawn King.
Yeah, amazing.
And it's, I mean, my God, it's 60 kind of very young sort of, you know, we set that it's an entry level opportunity. And, you know, the intention is that kind of over the 10 weeks of the course, they're going to write a play. It could be their first play. And you have to have 60 people on that Zoom. I mean, it's totally full screen. It's really, but to discover that it's possible to do that. I mean, and Dawn is a brilliant teacher. She's taught for National Theatre New Views. So I brought her to Leicester previously when I was at Curve to run a New Views programme there. And you know, and Dawn's, she put up a Twitter thread yesterday actually, just about what she's learned about now teaching via that mechanism. But people seem to be absolutely loving it. And, you know, it's made me go that, well, for us at HighTide, I don't think we're ever going to run a class or a programme of that nature ever again if it's not via Zoom, because it just so immediately removes so many barriers. Of course it does. I mean, like, the odds of us getting 60 people in a classroom somewhere, or, you know, in a rehearsal room or a seminar room at one of the theatres that we work with, that, you know, the way it's access in a nutshell.
Yeah. There's no physical barriers, I guess, because you just need your computer screen.
Exactly. And you know, and Dawn's feedback certainly is that it doesn't feel like it's restricting the quality of what she's able to achieve with the writers, and the participants seem to be absolutely loving it. So yeah, so you kind of go, well, why would we? And it's so interesting that in this time of necessity, like, that option was always available to us. It's always been available to every theatre. We've not necessarily decided to take up those options because of course, you know, we believe, you know, it's theatre. We believe in liveness. We believe in human interaction. But in contexts like that will be the future for us, straightforwardly. You know, and also, hey, it means, you know, otherwise we'd probably be paying Dawn's train fare every week to get somewhere. So we're saving money as well. Exactly.
Yeah, I think that one of the very small good things that maybe is going to come out of this is maybe it will redefine what we think of as theatre and how we perform and the mediums that we use to explore performance. I mean, I know with like National Theatre Live, it's just getting these performances out on such a wide scale, and just things like that, those small things are positive changes.
I mean, I would, you know, I think there's a note of caution around the live streaming, which is I would ask the question of how many of those people tuning in. Of course, they're tuning in their thousands, but how many of those people are not already regular theatre goers?
That's a very good point.
you know, how many people has that actually encouraged to take a punt on theatre? Because there's a wider set of messaging, you know. We all know that National Theatre are doing this, we all know that, etc. But, you know, so there's some interrogation, I think, of the data to do there still. But nonetheless, it's a huge and democratic and accessible platform. I mean, I think there's further for us to go, because, you know, the outcome of all of this shouldn't be that every theatre company decides it's going to become a film company on 20% of the budget, because we won't make good films. So there is something about what the form can be and what it can do, you know, so that we do distinguish ourselves from film and television, which we have to.
Definitely.
There's something about its interactivity, or its possibility for online community, or these sorts of things, that I think will be where the theatre sector really takes hold of what digital can offer us. And now is not the time necessarily for that. This has been about immediate responses and about us all wanting to offer in the moment. But as I mentioned earlier, with our crisis support programme, it's really exciting to look at what could be really unusual that starts to emerge.
Well, I think that we've had quite a good discussion. We've covered all things, covered loads of things. We've covered a very wide range. So thank you so much for talking to us today.
No, it's really, really lovely. I mean, you know, huge fan of younger theatre. Spoken to many of your writers over the years, who've always had a progressive and intelligent perspective on what the hell it is we're all doing. So kudos to you guys.
No, thank you so much. And I hope that you manage to keep safe and sane.
Yeah, I'm going to fire up Dua Lipa now, fear not.
Good job. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Have a lovely day. Bye.
Bye.